Take a 2,000-ton converted Russian research vessel. Add a highly skilled and experienced skipper and crew, plus a small select team of environment and wildlife experts. Then add a mixed pack of much less experienced Irish adventurers from a wide variety of backgrounds, but united by a common interest, to be at one with the environment. So far, their journey has taken them from Dublin to the very tip of Argentina, Ushuaia, capital of Tierra del Fuego, the southernmost city in the world. But the true destination is Antarctica, latitude more than 60 degrees south, for a close encounter with all the wild magic of that barren continent, an ice desert almost twice the size of Australia, as yet untamed, largely unspoiled, and indeed, for the most part, untravelled. So the ᴅᴇᴜ steams out into the Beagle Channel, the Ushuaia pilot leaves, and the adventure really begins. As they start to clock up the sea miles, the luck of the Irish seems to be holding. Cape Horn to starboard is in a rare, benign mood. And as the ship starts her 24-hour journey across Drake's Passage to Antarctica, she encounters nothing worse than a heavy ocean swell, giving her a strong rolling motion. Uncomfortable, certainly, but never threatening. But it's not long before there is some real excitement as the vessel reaches the Antarctic Convergence, which runs right round the continent of Antarctica. This is where the warm subtropical waters of the Atlantic, Pacific and Indian Oceans meet the heavy, icy polar seas. Even in calm conditions, the contact produces confused wave patterns. But the moderate temperatures also encourage growth of sea life, creating a rich feeding ground, much enjoyed by albatrosses that have followed the ship from Tierra del Fuego. And there's a treat for the whale watchers on board too, as the ship encounters a pod of humpback whales, which seem to be so intent on taking advantage of a plentiful supply of krill that they're unaware of the ship until the very last moment. With the Convergence behind her, the ᴅᴇᴜ is now officially in Antarctic waters. The air is much colder, but the swell decreases and the ship makes good speed. But now there's a new reason to stay alert: icebergs. Day and night the crew will keep a strict lookout. First, small growlers, parts of decaying bergs, are spotted, and even in the half-light of a cold, misty morning, it's exciting. Especially to Shane, the youngest solo traveller on board, who is also moved to think about his reasons for being here.
It's basically, it's the ocean and it's an extreme, Antarctica. People go to Spain for their holidays, they don't go to Antarctica, so, it's wildlife and it's something wild altogether, and that's what I'm really interested in, so. It's a lot different for me because I'm so much younger than a lot of the generation that's in control now, and the effects that everything we do now is affecting Antarctica is going to be affecting us in the future, and so it'll be having bigger effects on me and my generation and generations after me. And so I think, really the responsibility falls to people, around our age to really, sort this out.
And then, just at the very edges of the mist, the first sight of the real thing.
That's an iceberg! Wow, it's quite something. I think it's bigger than the ship.
Being out in nature itself, being able to touch what for me is true reality, it's kind of, I suppose I've described it to people like almost plugging me into an electrical socket. It's like life blood, and it touches me very deeply.
Finally, some 48 hours after leaving Ushuaia, there's land beyond the bergs. Penguin Island in the South Shetlands, where the group hope to make their first trip ashore. A scouting party sets off to assess conditions and find a suitable landing site. But there's a problem. The shoreline is beset by brash ice, and it's increasing all the time. It's possible to land the group in such conditions, but there's no guarantee of being able to approach closely enough to get them off again. The crew decides the risks are simply too great, but an ice cruise by Zodiac proves a highly popular alternative. The next day, things look brighter. The ship has relocated to Brown Bluff on the Antarctic Peninsula itself, a favoured breeding ground for the Adelie penguin. There are strict guidelines enforced to protect both habitat and wildlife, so once again an advance group goes ahead to choose a landing spot where there's no possibility of disturbing the nesting site.
The situation here, lads, is that they've got to keep below the Adelie breeding area, which is just above the top of the beach. They're okay as long as they walk along the beach itself. There's a very broad open plain at the end of the beach here, at the end of the Adelie colony, and they can walk there fairly freely. But the great thing is, remember the guidelines, fellas, okay?
But for the second time, Antarctica proves she works to her own guidelines. Just as the boats carrying the main party head for shore, the weather suddenly deteriorates. A katabatic wind springs up, caused by cold air sliding down the steep slopes of glaciers and mountains and channeling into the anchorage. Such winds could quickly reach storm force, and this one's off to a howling start. Again, the landing must be aborted. Then, as they return, a radio call from the ship. Out there, she's getting 60 knots over the deck. The anchor's not holding, and she's dragging backwards onto the ice. Getting passengers and Zodiacs safely back on board is no easy task, but the skipper manoeuvres the ship to give as much shelter as possible, and all is well. Life in the Antarctic is always highly challenging, of course. At one time there were more than 50 scientific bases here. Today, it's just about half that number, and it's at one of the biggest ones, the Argentinian base at Esperanza, that the group in its entirety finally gets ashore.
Well, today we make history from an Irish context insofar as this is the largest ever Irish group to set foot on the continent of Antarctica.
What sort of a feeling does that give you after all the months and endless preparation?
I'm absolutely feel fantastic. I can't believe it. I mean, I feel like jumping in the snow here and just going, yes!
The Esperanza base is happy to receive visitors, and the station chief is happy to receive a memento of this Irish encounter.
Wild Ireland magazine, of course.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
But it's a surprising place too, because this is not just a scientific outpost. These are family homes where young children live and learn alongside their parents and seem to enjoy their harsh environment. So does Shane. When the penguins put on an impressive body surfing demonstration, he can't resist having a go too.
How's about that, Shane?
That was fun. Not as good as a penguin though.
But attempts to strike up a conversation with an apparently sociable penguin didn't work out. Maybe it doesn't speak Irish. Meanwhile, other members of the group reflect on their feelings.
It is almost like the day of creation, you know. It seems as if it's the same as the day the good Lord put it here. And, you know, it kind of put a shiver up your spine to be in the same area where men toiled and struggled.
ever since I saw Scott at the Antarctic in the mid-1950s. I've always wanted to come. I've collected books and I've seen as many documentaries and I've seen all of the films and things that I could see on Antarctica. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Well, I think all of Antarctica has a message for us, you know. I mean, it's the only place in the world where every country seems to pull together in the one direction for the one aim, which is to keep Antarctica pristine and as it was before men came here. And you know, the Argentinians, while the buildings are a bit garish in colour, I suppose they need that to break up the monotony of the area around them. So I like the way they painted the navigation beacons green and gold, especially for us too.
And from an Argentinian base to a British one, but we'll find no family homes here. This is Deception Island, the most visited island in the Antarctic. Its entrance channel, known as Neptune's Bellows, certainly is deceptive.
Away on the starboard beam now, that's Bailey Head. I have to say that the entrance is much narrower than it looks because there is a wreck and a shoal in the middle of what looks like the gateway into the inside. So the ship has to stay well over to the side of the entrance. Also, please, could I say that if you're on the bridge at this time, it is important to keep very quiet. Please let's have total silence as we go through Neptune's Bellows.
Deception Island is an active volcano, the flooded central caldera now forming a natural harbour. The most recent eruptions were in the late 60s, destroying the abandoned Chilean and British research bases and much of the whaling station at Whalers Bay, although reminders of those brutal days are still scattered on the beaches.
This is a very fragile habitat, and what's more, we don't really know enough about it to be able to say what is going to be damaging and what is not going to be damaging. That's one of the things that WWF would like to see more of, the precautionary principle put into action. We see a lot of research stations here in Antarctica, and we've been present enough to be able to go and visit some of them. But the real science that needs to be happening doesn't seem to be happening. We're not getting the facts and figures that we need to work on in order to make really good rules and regulations for Antarctica to protect the Antarctica wildlife and habitats.
Throughout the voyage, one of the most moving parts of the experience for the Irish contingent has been a feeling of kinship with those who have gone before them. And nowhere is this felt more strongly than at Port Lockroy, the first British Antarctic survey base, built in 1943 and now maintained as a museum. A particular hero is the Kerryman Tom Crean, initially a dog handler with Robert Falcon Scott's exploration team, and later to sail on the ill-fated Endurance, lost after becoming trapped in the ice on the expedition led by Sir Ernest Shackleton, also, of course, born in Ireland, in County Kildare.
I suppose my preconceptions have gone back quite a long time, you know, back to when I was about 10 or 12 years of age, when I was first handed a book called South with Scott. And then when I discovered that one of the key characters in it came from 20 miles away from where I lived, I was hooked on Antarctica forevermore, really.
When Tom Crean came back to Ireland, at that particular time there was a problem with the English jurisdiction in Ireland, and he could never speak about his exploits. It was only in the last few years, really, that it all has come together. I suppose Tom Crean was just an ordinary guy. Being a mountain person, he'd be very hard there, because I think in Ireland at that particular time you wouldn't have the benefit of great clothing or shoes to wear even. So he'd be involved in the mountains there with sheep probably, and I'd say this helped him when he was in the outdoor of Antarctic. Would make him healthier than the more probably upper class at the time.
Port Lockroy also proves a superb site for seal and penguin watching. The male Gentoo penguins provide much unintentional amusement as they laboriously pad their way across a beach littered with perfectly acceptable stones and even steal from other males just to present their ladyloves with the one special stone that they privately feel will make her nest complete. Not that she seems very impressed. And perhaps it's just as well that there's some humour to balance history, because after several days of being part of this vastness, some of the Irish pack are clearly moved by their experience.
No matter how much you read, no matter what you expect, you can never be prepared for the actual reality of it. You don't just see it, you feel it. And the English language is really quite inadequate when it comes to seeing what we saw today.
Tourism in itself can be a danger. I suppose that is our responsibility as tourists here, to go home and to say to people, you know, this is, oh, I don't know.
But of course, the pioneers whose courage and resilience the group admire and respect came to this wilderness in the spirit of exploration and discovery. Today we come simply as tourists, just to look. The group are clearly having an experience they will never forget. But this is a fragile and vulnerable environment. So, should they be here?
Very much so, I think. You know, sometimes the scientists like to give the impression that Antarctica is for science only. But of course it's not. It belongs to all of us. I think it's absolutely right that poets and musicians and writers and even accountants should come here to enjoy it. Because it's only when we all come here and see how wonderful it is that we go back home again and protect the place, make sure that we support the conservation movement in general.
Done sensitively, it can create ambassadors for areas that wouldn't otherwise have them. We do need people to come down and see these incredible pristine areas as they are, but we need to be very, very careful that the numbers are controlled and the way the visitors get here is controlled.
Obviously enough, people want to come here. It's a wonderful thing to see, and I suppose in a sense it's wrong to make it difficult. On the other hand, I think, you know, a couple of days rolling about in the Drake Passage never did anybody any harm and teaches them a bit of respect too.
Then, without warning, the weather changes yet again. Just when it seems it can't get any whiter, suddenly it's a whiteout. And it's all happening in Paradise. Well, Paradise Bay to be exact. And it seems that even here, where ice and snow are part of every day, everywhere, when it starts falling from the sky, everybody goes just a little mad. And some are more mad than others. Some of the group leaders take time off from organising the tour on the ice to take a unique look under the ice. And they have the cheek to claim that the water's just fine.
The water's cold but beautiful. It's like the canal back home. If you ever swim in the canal in ice, I'd say it's about maybe +1. Although you can see it's starting to ice over, but it's absolutely beautiful. Just the hands are a bit cold. That
night, a barbecue, Antarctic style. time for a laugh.
What part of the world do you come from?
I come from Santo Domingo, County Kerry.
Time for a shiver, but also time to put forward some poetic
Read
thoughts.
this thing out. It's called the Iceland, and I wrote it in 5 minutes today. In this land, the sunshine fails. In this place of sea and wind, of birds that swim like fish, of giant seabirds that never land. In this place, giant fish breathe air, where men have camped, cried and died. This land belongs to nature, not to God or man. In this last place, where we, the new pharaohs, travel in our felucca boats of the west, we read about the conquest of the past, the courage, the pain, the glory. We try to visualize more space boats of times past. Scott, Shackleton, Crean. For me, this is a spiritual journey. It is without doubt a great journey.
And so it's the last day, and it dawns bright and clear and calm. No snow, no swell, just peace and tranquility. And then a touch of magic. If the difficulty of getting to Antarctica teaches respect, it also brings rewards. The great whales, in this case a pod of humpbacks, are in the bay. For the ice pack, it's the perfect finale.
I think I still fear for the well-being of the planet, and I think that this has been a real eye-opener for me, that we can be 14,000 kilometres away from home and still have the same issues and concerns around the environment.
Journey has taken them from Dublin to the very tip of Argentina, Ushuaia, capital of Tierra del Fuego, the southernmost city in the world. But the true destination is Antarctica, latitude more than 60 degrees south, for a close encounter with all the wild magic of that barren continent, an ice desert almost twice the size of Australia, as yet untamed, largely unspoiled, and indeed, for the most part, untravelled. So the ᴅᴇᴜ steams out into the Beagle Channel, the Ushuaia pilot leaves, and the adventure really begins. As they start to clock up the sea miles, the luck of the Irish seems to be holding. Cape Horn, to starboard, is in a rare, benign mood. And as the ship starts her 24-hour journey across Drakes, also encourage growth of sea life, creating a rich feeding ground, much enjoyed by albatrosses that have followed the ship from Tierra del Fuego. And there's a treat for the whale watchers on board too, as the ship encounters a pod of humpback whales, which seem to be so intent on taking advantage of a plentiful supply of krill that they're unaware of the ship until the very last moment. passage to Antarctica, she encounters nothing worse than a heavy ocean swell, giving her a strong rolling motion. Uncomfortable, certainly, but never threatening. But it's not long before there is some real excitement as the vessel reaches the Antarctic convergence, which runs right round the continent of Antarctica. This is where the warm subtropical waters of the Atlantic, Pacific and Indian Oceans meet the heavy icy polar seas. Even in calm conditions, the contact produces confused wave patterns. But the moderate temperatures take a 2,000-ton converted Russian research vessel, add a highly skilled and experienced skipper and crew, plus a small select team of environment and wildlife experts. Then add a mixed pack of much less experienced Irish adventurers from a wide variety of backgrounds, but united by a common interest, to be at one with the environment. So far, their